Okay, so it succeeded. Now you will notice that there's an API service.g.dart generated by retrofit. And now there's no more error in our function, and the API endpoint is set up successfully for us. So make sure that there's no error at this point. And then lastly, we need to create a function to call estimate vehicle emission. So let's do that right now. Under provider, we're going to create a new folder. And this new folder is going to be called requests. We're going to create a new folder as well for response. And the reason why we're doing it under provider is because when we send this API call, right, we want a way to be able to cache it. Because once they return to us JSON data and we don't cache it, the object might be lost in Flutter, therefore needing us to send another API request. And when we don't cache our data, what will end up happening is we will overcall the API and it will be inefficient. So that's why we're going to implement some sort of caching so that the Flutter app remembers what's the memory, remembers what's the data. So after the cache, then we will be able to combine them all together. So since this is a river plot file, we need to import the river plot annotation. Okay, so here we created a translation request state, which is a provider that built a method or returns a method, not a method, sorry, returns a class called translation request object. And this object is going to contain a default value of car medium, petrol, 0, and distance kilometer. Distance kilometer being sent to the API. So this is going to be our default value. And then similarly, we just have to run our build method. So that run build runner build to build our view report. And now there's going to be a new file generated for us. And then after this, right, we need to declare a few functions to update the vehicle type, the fuel type, and all of those things. So let's do that. So over here, we created 4 functions. Each function allows us to update our current transportation default object with new field names. So by default, it's car medium. But if let's say I want to update to bus, then I can just call the update vehicle type function to update it to bus. That's what we're doing here. Now that we're done with the transportation request, let's do the transportation response. So under response, we're going to create a new folder called transportation as well. So similarly, since it is also a river plot file, we need to import the river plot annotation. So over here, you'll notice that it's a bit different from our request in the sense that we declare a new thing called API service over here. So basically, to get a response from the endpoint, we need to go through this thing called API service that we declared in API service.dart. That's why we're calling it, and we're gonna initialize it inside the build method, and then return the future value file over here. So for now, we're going to generate it again using that build runner. And then lastly, we just have to send the request. So let me just write a function to do that. So over here, because we're sending a response, we're sending a request to the API endpoint, right? So there's three possible states. It can either be a success, it could be loading, or it could be failure. In any sense, this three state, success, failure, or loading, we need to handle it in terms of our code. So I'm going to create three different states, and for each state, we're going to return a different value. So starting with the request, when we send the request, we want to make the state loading. And then we're going to use the API service instance to call the estimate vehicle emission function. This function will take in 4 attributes, which is the request, which we declared in the parameter, the bearer token, API host, and API key. So for bearer token, we already know it already. We just have to import it from .environment. So let's import it from .env, and the name for that in our .env file is of bearer token. So just copy this of bearer token key and paste it inside the carbon emission in the provider over here. Like this. So essentially, we're sending the request to the endpoint with our current transportation request, the of bearer token stored in our env file, the API host in our env file, and also our API key in our env file. So that's what we're doing here. And if let's say the response is successful, So let's say if it's successful, we're going to set the state to async data, which is a success flag. And finally, if there's an error, the function will catch the error, and we need to set the state to async error. And we can just return the error and the stack trace. So that's pretty much it for the calculate transportation emission function. So now we are basically done with the back end. All that's left to do is just the front end side. So right now, remember, we have our little card here, but we haven't finished coding the form yet. So we're going to code out the form, connect to the back end, and then try and test out whether it works or not. So the remaining part is just UI, and it will be much more easy to follow along. So right now, the first thing we're going to create is this thing called distance traveled text box. Okay, so to do that, we need to create under the widget file, we're going to create a new widget called custom text field. Or you can call it expanded text field as well because it's expanded. So after you create this file called expanded text field.dart, you're gonna start to declare the UI. I'm just going to code out all the UI things out. But essentially right now, we are creating this widget called expanded text field. And it takes in 4 parameters, which is the height, label, text, controller, and onChange function. And the UI will look like this. After we code it out, we can add it into our screen and see how it looks like. So I'll just explain the UI very briefly. First of all, we created a column. In that column, we have a few things, the text and the size box. To represent this better, we can think of it like this. So over here, the text refers to, here at line number 15, the text is referring to the distance traveled text. And then the size box is referring to the box at the bottom here, which is white color. Upon clicking on this box, we want to show a keyboard, right? So the keyboard will be a type of number. So it will only allow the user to enter numbers. And whenever the user types something, we will trigger the onChange function and return the value of what the user typed. That's pretty much what we're doing. Yeah. So we're done with the text field already. Let's create a drop-down menu. Okay, so I created a new file called custom dropdown, and this file is going to be a little bit different because as we remember, each of the data type is different. So for a distance unit, it is a type of distance unit. For vehicle type, it is a type of vehicle type. And for field type, it is a type of field type. So it will be very difficult to create multiple drop-down because we have to keep duplicating our code, right? Since each drop-down only accommodate a specific data type. So to fix this problem of data type restriction, we're going to create a generic type where our widget will be able to take in any type of data and still be able to display the data field. So if you guys never heard of it, the data type is called T. That's it. It's just called type. And instead of a string, instead of a string or instead of an integer, it's just type. So I'll show you an example. And with this generic data type, we will be able to accommodate various data type. So let me show you like over here. So we can accommodate vehicle, we can accommodate fuel, we can accommodate distance unit. So create one single dropdown, they can accommodate all. So here's how to create a generic class. Okay, so essentially what I've done here is I created a widget called custom dropdown, and in this custom dropdown widget, I'm accepting any type that extends the has value interface. So if we check again from the data, right, the field type implements has value. The vehicle type also implements the has value interface, and the distance unit also implements the has value interface. Therefore, all three data type will implement the same interface, right? In our generic type, we can just declare that we accept all data type that implements this has value interface, and it will work. So let's code it out. Okay, so it's a bit hard to understand this part, I think. Drop down menu, T, and then map item, then T again somehow, and then render this thing. So essentially, to put it simply, right, this T refers to the type of anything they want to throw at it. So for example, if we are giving it a field type, then the field type will be the type of T in the transportation response provider over here. Okay? In the custom dropdown over here. Let me close other tabs. Yeah. And remember in the field type dot, right, we have this thing called values where it has all the items inside. So that's why we are actually taking the value, which is the items, and we are mapping everything out. So for each item in the list, for each item like petrol, diesel, or unknown, inside the list, right? Inside the list, we are rendering out a menu item and having a text called, creating a text value to store the value of the field type. So for example, petrol, the corresponding value is just the string petrol. Diesel's corresponding value is just the string diesel, and unknown is just unknown. That's what we're doing at the moment. And we're just mapping out all the things into a list so that it can be attached into the items attribute. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave it here for a bit. But the code can be found inside the Notion documentation that I shared at the start of the workshop. So I think only got one more component to complete. So the last thing is to create the button widget. So if you notice, we also have this button at the page that we need to click, right? So to click on this button, we have to create a component. So to do that, I'm going to create another widget called button, or I'll just call it calculate button. So calculate button. So this is going to be the button that we're going to create for that. So the UI is similar. I'll just copy it. Okay, so this button will take in all parameters and render out a gesture detector. Gesture detector is a special widget that allows you to detect when a button or when a movement is being pressed. So it allows you to detect tap, slide, hold, things like that, double tap. So that's why we're adding gesture detector, and we're going to render out the UI after this. So that's the code for the UI. We're creating a container, which is the blue color box around the button, and then we're padding it from the top by 8 pixels, aligning the items in the center, and setting the width and the height to the amount. So for height, actually, we'll set it to around 6% of the screen, like this. Then we're creating a box decoration with the background color to be the button color that we added at the top. And then we're going to create the button to be circular, to be having a border radius of 16 pixels. And then the button is going to be called calculate, and it's going to be styled normally with a white color background or the white color font color. Yeah, that's what we're doing here in our calculate button. And then finally, we have the last widget, which is the loading skeleton. So when the API is loading, right, it will have like a spinner because it tells the user that, hey, your API is still waiting for response. So to do that, we can create a skeleton to show user while the data is still being fetched from the API. So let's just create a skeleton, a very basic one. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to this thing. So right after you send your API, there should be like a loading indicator like this, spinning before you get your data back. So that's why, because if you don't have this, right, it will just straight away become blank. So it's better to just have like an indicator to show that it's loading for the data. So here's how to code it out. So this is the skeleton. It takes up 32% of the screen at the width of whatever we feed the width, and then it shows a circular indicator while it's loading. So that's all for all the component. So finally, we can move back to the transportation screen and set up everything that we've created. So let's go to the transportation screen right now, which is the current screen that we're displaying at the moment. And let's start to implement all the functions that we created. Before we do that, it's important to change the stateful widget to consumer stateful widget because we use Riverpod. And Riverpod only supports consumer stateful widget. So let's do that first. And for all the states, you need to change it to consumer states as well. Consumer state, and then this one as well. Consumer state. Yeah, so after you've changed the consumer state and also changed to consumer stateful widget, you can go down over here to the media query over here, and we're gonna declare a few things. So the first thing we're gonna declare, not inside the build method, sorry. You have to declare it outside the build method here. And we're gonna create a new controller for the text editor. Distance value controller. Then after override. Okay, so basically we created a text editing controller, and this controller is going to track what the user input in their distance value. So later there's a form for distance value, it will take in controller. And we are setting it as late because before we build we need to wait until the UI to finish building before we can access the controller, right? So that's why we set it as a late variable. And upon the state initialization, we are going to declare it to a default string of 0. Then upon switching screen away from the carbon emission screen, translation emission screen, we're going to be disposing this controller so that it releases all the memory back to prevent memory leak. So that's what we're doing at this chunk of code here. So after that, under the height and the width method, let's declare our river pod providers so that we can interact with our transportation request and response. So final request. So as previously discussed before, in our eraser.dart example, we are basically creating subscribers. So I'm telling the system that this request.state is currently subscribed to the translation request state provider. So when this state changes, whoever is listening or subscribed to it will also change. So that's what the ref.watch is doing. And then for ref.read, we're going to be implementing it later. But ref.read is whenever user selected a dropdown, we want to notify that the thing has changed. So that's the notifier. So let's create the notifier. So this notifier will enable us to interact with all the functions, such as changing the dropdown and things like that. So now that we've initialized all 4 of these river pod providers, we can now change and implement all the features here. So first of all, just delete this emission card because currently this emission card is hard coded to 0, right? And we already have an API. So let's just delete the old emission card that we have and implement a dynamic emission card. So when we get the response, there's only three possible states. There's the data state, there's the error state, and there's also the loading state. So for the data state, we want to display the data, which is the carbon emission response. So let's code that out. Okay, so if it's successful, it will render the emission cut component. If it's error, we're just going to show a text. And finally, if it's loading, we want to display the loading skeleton. Oh, wait, what's going on? Stateful element is not a type. Hold on. Oh, I think I know why. Hold on. I added a question mark over here because because when we send the request, right, we might not have an emission request. We might get an error. So that's why I added an optional carbon emission response question mark here. So now it's nullable. And then I'll try to review that. Hold on now, guys. There's some error. Oh, okay. We have to add another question mark here as well, since it's possible to be error. So this future here, also have to add a question mark. And after you add this, you need to rebuild the whole thing since the file changes already. Okay, so it's done. Okay, now it's working. Okay, so I'll go back to the translation screen again. Thank you. So if it's loading, it will display a skeleton. But as of now, there's no data, so it displays a 0. Right. So after this, you want to create a form. So the form is at the bottom. So after the column here, after the column, you want to create that. So this drop down is going to be, I'll just follow the Figma design here. So distance traveled, distance unit, vehicle type, and fuel type. So I'm currently doing the second one. There should be exactly one item. There should be exactly one item. How come? Wait, something is not right. It should work. Unless my request modifier is wrong. Request state provider. Sorry, guys, I need to debug.
that's small.
Oh, I found the problem already. So I only render the text, but I never render the value. So there should be a value here, and then I should render the value, which is just the hyphen. Then what's the error here? Okay, yeah, it should work now. Oh, okay, it works. So now the drop-down menu works, and it has two values already. And then we just have to attach the other two drop-down menu and the button, and it will work.
Custom drop down again. Custom drop down this one. And vehicle type by value. And this one is just request state of vehicle type. This is just request modifier dot change date vehicle type with the latest.
So we also created the drop-down menu for the vehicle type. Then last one is the drop-down menu for fuel type. Okay, so right now what we did is we created the button as well. And when we click the button, it will send the request using REST notifier, calculate translation request, and it takes the current state of the translation request. So by right now, it should work. So if I was to type 25 km over here, and then I'll use maybe a train, and that uses diesel, for example, and I can click on calculate. Hold on. Sorry guys, there's so many errors. It didn't happen like this when I was coding it in the past. Okay, let me fix it again. Convert object to an encodable object. Field instance of distance unit. Field instance, let me check. Field instance of distance unit. Response notifier. Expression request. Response. The response is being sent to the provider, right? Yes. The provider currently is located in this folder under the response configuration response.dart. Over here. Oh my god. Oh no, it's not. Okay. Response. Response over here. Great. Double integers success. Oh, okay, I understand already. So in transportation request.dart, here you see that we use vehicle type dot value, field type dot value, but in distance unit, I didn't put dot value. So it's returning the instance of the object rather than the value of the object. Ayo, I'm so mad at myself. Okay, it should work now. Hey, sorry, I need to redo it. Okay, hey. It should work now. So if I type 25 km, I drive a big car, maybe, and it's in diesel. Bruh. Okay. Hold on, something is wrong. I'm so sorry, guys. But at this point, if you guys want to leave, you guys can leave already. I'll try to debug and see what's wrong and see what what went wrong again over here. But we're getting there. We're getting there. Yeah. Why? To double. Okay. Okay. It's a runner. Found this ID. The response is wrong in the sense that the provider is wrong, right? Because once we return this response, we update the provider.
That means that the item is null. It's confirm in this file. The error is carbon emission response. Carbon emission response. It's not here, wall. What's wrong? Status, success. It's not here. What's going on? All the keys are working, yeah. Oh, is it? API key. No, it's correct. I'm not sure what's wrong.
Suzanne, is Sylvian here? Oh, okay. Can. Because while I'm debugging, she can shout out her event first. But it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I'll just try to debug. Okay, wait. I'll try to debug for maybe 5 more minutes, and then if let's say I really cannot debug, then I'll send you guys a recording, and then maybe that it will work. Yeah. But I'm so sorry, guys. I'll try to find out what's wrong.
If I were to put it as 1, 1, 1, 1, by default, it should then set to 1, 1, 1, 1, right? So if I were to start again, shouldn't be a response though. Hold on, why is it not clearing the cache? I need to rebuild this. Close, rebuild this. Alright, the transition is clear. We should have just one.
Sorry guys, this is embarrassing, but I'm not able to debug at the moment without taking or dragging on additional time. So I'm just gonna conclude today's workshop. But here's the point where it should start working and we'll be able to see the result and compare what the results are. But since it's not working, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open another version of it that's working. And then show you guys how it's supposed to look like. And then we can conclude today's workshop. So here's a version that's working. So this version it shows something like this at the moment. And essentially when you click on, let's say any value, right, and click on calculate, you should be able to see something like this. So here it says that the emissions for traveling 25 km is about 5,934. And essentially, when you put this into Gemini and ask how much is this, it's basically around, this amount of carbon dioxide will take about 3 months to process. So then you can compare it to maybe train, then you can see what's the difference maybe for taxis. I don't know what's going on. I think the taxi one is wrong, the endpoint that I created. Okay, all this error wasn't here before. Maybe there are some issues on the API side, but yeah, you basically will be able to see what's the difference. Oh, somehow this one works. So for bus, you can see it's lesser than train and taxi, and for motorbike, it's even lesser than bus. So the same distance traveled can be represented, and you can basically compare and discover how much carbon dioxide you're emitting into the world through different stages. And then for electricity, basically this is the page that I didn't teach, but that's what we wanted to cover a lot in today's workshop. But unfortunately, it wasn't able to finish. So that's why we had to conclude it haphazardly. But either way, Okay. Either way, thank you for you guys' time for joining the workshop. I know that the workshop is very difficult to follow because the content is very difficult to follow. I mean, the content is very hard and there's a lot of content. But thanks for staying until the end. I tried my best to teach retrofit and report, and I hope that you guys kind of understand the concept, if not the syntax. Because the syntax can be difficult to understand, but the concept should stay with you if you could take anything away. So here's a feedback form for you guys to fill in. If you guys have any feedback you guys want to tell me, that would be truly appreciated. And for all the feedbacks that we receive, right, you guys will receive a badge as well from GDGOC. So all of you guys will receive a badge that you guys can post on LinkedIn for attending the workshop. So thank you so much for your time. And I apologize once again for not being able to finish the workshop on time, and also for not being able to complete a working product due to a lot of issues. Yeah, so that's it. And before I, oh, you cannot scan, okay. Okay, you guys can scan first. Oh, sorry. Oh, can I make it bigger? Okay, hold on. Okay, sorry. I should just put it like a QR for one slide. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, sorry guys. Hey, hold on. I think I know what's wrong. Hey, no, never mind. Never mind. I'll go back and debug it. I just don't want to take additional time from you guys. So that's why I'm concluding it. Before I continue, there's supposed to be our AI lead was supposed to promote this workshop, but because the workshop took extra time, she had another workshop to attend, so she wasn't able to come to this and promote it. But basically, in 4 days, on the 24th of March, so today is 20th of March, right? So in 4 days, she's going to be hosting a workshop where she's going to be teaching you guys how to use YOLO V8 to create a facial AI attendance tracking system in Python. So you'll also learn how to use OpenCV, Streamlit, and it's open for beginners. And hope that you guys will join us. It's between 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. And also food will be provided for this workshop since it's around the dinner time. So yeah, hope you guys can join her workshop. So this is by our AI lead. Yeah. So that's all for today's workshop. Thanks for joining again, and sorry for not being able to finish. What's wrong? What's going on? Okay. I'll end the stream online and then stop the recording.